Hello. Welcome to Season XV of the Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. In each episode, we both watch the same movie on our own and then record a conversation together about what we liked, what we hated, if we were scared, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. This season, we're watching movies from the 90s and talking about how they fit into the larger picture of 90s horror and how each year from that decade stacks up against the others. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the episode. So the actual theme of this season is we love the 90s. We're going back. We are watching movies from the 90s that we have not previously reviewed. We are not doing movies that are sequels or remakes, and we are trying to let the 90s have their fair share of credit, maybe, for their contribution to the history of horror movies.
Yep.
Been a little hit or miss so far, but we have found some good ones.
I think so, yeah. And we're only partially through, part way through, yeah.
Yeah, we're just hanging out right here in 1993.
Right.
And this is our second movie from 1993, because last week we did Doppelganger. And then next week we'll be moving on to 1994, and then we're going to continue on through. But because this is our second week of reviewing a movie from 1993, at the end of the episode we're going to go back and see where 1993 stacks up against the other years from the 90s that we have watched movies from thus far. I will say this, I feel like, was a fitting choice, because in Doppelganger, we had a young Drew Barrymore as the starlet, and in this one, we have a young Jennifer Aniston. So that's basically as 90s as you can get.
That's very true, and actually might be the reason why I picked Leprechaun itself, other than the fact that I think I'd seen it, but I don't remember. I was just like, oh, let's see what she was like back in 93. When did Friends start?
I think roughly the same year, or maybe the year after. I actually looked that up while I was watching it, but it has now been like 2 weeks since I actually watched this movie.
It's been a long time. Yeah.
But yeah, lots to talk about with this one, and I'll do a quick intro, and then we can get into that's totally how you get paint on you when you're actually working details.
Perfect. That's fucking great.
In 1993, Trimaran Pictures brought us Leprechaun, a dark comedy horror film starring Jennifer Aniston and a bunch of other people you probably won't recognize. When Jennifer goes to spend the summer with her dad in an abandoned old house for some reason, she finds a hunky young man to flirt with and stumbles her way in between an angry leprechaun and its stolen gold. This movie was made on a budget of $1 million and made over $8.5 million at the box office. Despite poor reviews from critics, this movie was a fan favorite and spawned a long line of sequels, which is also very 90s. It can currently be streamed for free with ads, or without if you have that browser extension, on Tubi. I improvised a little bit there at the end. That's just kind of the quality showman that I am.
Well, first off, I like to say that was one of the better, and we'll get to the blank details that I had. It was the most I just felt it. I knew exactly what you meant. Yeah. The second thing I'd like to point out, though, is we said Jennifer Aniston, people we wouldn't know. However, I'd like to point out Mark Holton, who played Ozzy, was in Pee-wee's Big Adventure and Teen Wolf. Pee-wee's Big Adventure is what I'm here for, though. It's one of my all-time favorites.
I did not realize that.
Played Francis. And then the kid in there, I don't know his name, was also
another 90s kid.
Was also in Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, which is a very good film. However, I would be willing to accept the statement after if you said Jennifer Aniston and Mark Holton and a bunch of people
you don't recognize. Okay.
That would have been.
See,
that's good.
I've gotten to the point where I just can't distinguish a 90s kid sidekick from any others. Like, it's just such a stereotype of a role, a caricature, that it's just the same, like, insert fast-talking child actor. But yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and it's unfair because I've literally watched Pee-wee's Big Adventure probably more than the average person, and so I knew that guy right away. But the average horror movie viewer probably wouldn't recognize him.
What's missing from this picture? It's just me without my bike.
Without my bike. Yeah.
So there was something I absolutely hated about this movie that was in my notes a lot. And I think rather than like continuing to complain about it the whole episode, I'm just going to call it out now and get it out of my system.
Let's do it.
I thought the use of music in this one was abysmal. Like the soundtrack to this movie sounded like it was just copied and pasted from a set of generic like stock background music and then not actually mixed to whatever else was going on in the scene. And I feel like it never added anything to the scene. It never like perfectly fit the mood you were supposed to be feeling. And it just made everything seem like less intense or funny than it was supposed to. And in a movie that's like this over the top, like it's a ridiculous premise with not a huge budget. And so I feel like you need to make the movie in a way that complements what you're trying to do and work within the constraints of your budget and get creative. And I feel like a thing that can really help that doesn't require a lot of money is to just use music well, because it's kind of like an editing kind of stock thing. And the fact that it was poorly done here and almost felt like it was working against what the scene was trying to do a lot of the times just infuriated me the whole time.
You know, and I wondered, so I actually realized the same thing or similar, I would say, but I noticed because I was on my browser watching this, I went to YouTube after, and I had to turn my volume like almost all the way down. And I don't think I realized how much I was turning my computer speakers up the whole time, because I just felt like the audio was like, it's like the whole audio, computer speakers are going to sound terrible. You know, it's not going to sound as good as my TV or whatever. But no, I agree. I also realized that HBO Max does that a lot. Like we completely stopped watching a movie the other day because the audio was all messed up, found it on another site, and it was perfect. So could definitely be a Tubi thing, but the generic music piece of it, though, you could have inserted this music into like, I felt like any like I just feel like I heard the soundtrack before, I guess is where I'm getting at.
Yeah, definitely.
By it being generic, like it's just like almost kind of cheap. And one of the things we've talked about in the past is how well soundtracks can like make or break a movie. And like
definitely
going back and watching some of these 90s and 80s films that I've just loved, I know for a fact I've said I love it because the soundtrack, it's just an adventure soundtrack. It's like an adventure movie soundtrack, symphony. I mean, I guess since this is around, winter, Christmas time, when you guys are going to be hearing this, Home Alone's a good example of a good soundtrack, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
What I mean? It
really like nails those like emotional cues for how you're supposed to be relating to what's going on in the scene at the time. And again, it's not like Home Alone spent $1 billion getting like all the famous rock songs or anything. It just it picked music that complemented what the scenes were trying to do, and that created a soundtrack it's not necessarily even like memorable in its own right. You just know that like after watching Home Alone that the soundtrack was perfect for the movie.
How many times do you think, or how frequent do you think the cause of this, for like the bad soundtracks, is from like a producer or director being like the boss and being like, I can just go ahead and do this. Like it's not that much work. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's probably a lot like when you get an album that has a bad track order, because there was kind of a thing that happened on Twitter back when it was still Twitter and worth using, where when the latest Joyce Manor album came out, like some other like indie rock guy posted, a Spotify playlist that was like 40 ounces to Fresno fixed or something like that. And it had just like changed all the track listing. Yeah. And even the band was like, yeah, that's better. And so you think about though, like the little things like that maybe don't seem as important, like in the creative process of like finishing the thing and getting it out can really be things that like derail it just because you didn't stop to appreciate in the moment that it was more important than it seemed like. And I could totally see that being the case with the music on this one.
Yeah. And, you know, unfortunately too, I think that it's almost like the you know, the attention to details. If you're not willing to put in the effort for the backyard, so to speak, if you're not willing to mow your backyard, then why even mow your yard altogether? Because the yard as a whole is not complete. I feel like that a lot of the times when we see this with these with movies, that's kind of basically what I'm saying is I have a couple complaints about the rest of this film, and I think that sometimes some of it is just bad decisions that were made.
Yeah, I think so. That's, it's like, probably true.
Pay attention. If you can't get the sound right, find someone to do it. Like, hire me to do it. I'll do it for like $2,000 and put a lot of cool indie music in there. I promise. Like it'll work. I promise.
Bro, you like Garden State?
Yeah. It's like I got some shit you've never heard.
Yeah.
But yeah, it sucks too because that can really make a movie so good.
Yep.
So good.
But we have adequately complained about the music. We should move on. Talk about the movie as it stands. Otherwise.
Ugh.
This was from just like a horror perspective and what was this movie and what was it trying to be? It reminded me a lot of Child's Play.
Yeah.
Where it's like you kind of have this somewhat supernatural creature that is coming to kill people, but his attitude or his character, and maybe even like what Freddy became like later on in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, where it's kind of like, oh yeah, he's deadly, but he's also like kind of screwing with you and kind of like has a dark sense of humor and stuff. That I feel like this one like totally cashed in on. So I was wondering if by coming in after those movie franchises had developed a little bit, they were like, oh, we've seen what works with creating a good villain. So let's create almost like a supernatural slashery version that just skips right to the character being that way. And this to me feels way more like a kind of slasher movie from the 80s than it does like a more psychological thing like, oh shoot, what was the one you hated? Man Bites Dog or something like that, where it's kind of the more like gritty, real. This was really the more kind of like fantastic, over the top, you know, dark comedy, one-liners type movie.
Which is difficult for me to follow when the premise itself is pretty outlandish. Talking about leprechauns.
You don't believe in leprechauns?
Definitely don't. I definitely don't. Yeah, in all of my life, I've never seen one. I've lived a long time.
Well, it's been a good friendship, man. I'll be seeing you. I'm just kidding.
Wait, are you a leprechaun? No, but what I guess I'm kind of saying is like, you know, if the story is pretty you know, outlandish already, having humor, like, you need to have it in the right places, which can really kind of help, or else it just makes it even more comical when it shouldn't be comical, I guess, is what I'm saying. Like in scenes where it's supposed to be intense, it's like, well, it's not that intense because this whole thing is just kind of seems like it's kind of a comedy. And are we trying to make people laugh? Are we trying to make a horror movie? Like, what are we doing here? It just didn't mold well enough for me. And I think it's because it involved leprechauns.
You want to know something?
I didn't hate this film, though, if I'm being honest.
You want to know something really mean I wrote in my notes?
Yes, obviously.
Leprechaun is Ernest Scared Stupid without the self-awareness.
Yeah. No, dude. I mean, I don't think that's mean at all. It's not mean to be right. I mean, to be accurate, right? You know what I'm saying? It's like... That's accurate.
It's because it definitely took itself a lot more seriously. I think that they were really trying to make the leprechaun into a badass that you were supposed to be scared of, but also like kind of thought was funny a little bit in like a dark way. And some of the scenes were really over the top to the point that I kind of enjoyed them. Like when the leprechaun attacked the shop owner to get his coin back and was like pogo sticking him to death.
Yeah.
like there was this element of the leprechaun really, like, he had a purpose, which was getting his gold back, but he also definitely wanted to screw with the people he was killing. It wasn't just like walk up and knife him. He really wanted to make it a bigger, like, mess with them type experience,
right?
Which adds a level to it, I think. And sometimes that was funny. Other times it was just kind of annoying. It's almost like it. Even though this movie came out 30 years later, it's almost like Terrifier. Yeah, I can see that.
Where the clown, he definitely like toyed with him. He's kind of messed with him, killed him in pretty messed up but interesting ways. And this is almost similar, and honestly with the character's face and everything, like they kind of seem a lot similar now that I'm thinking about it. But that's the Terrifier is okay, even if the bad guy was a big leprechaun, because like at the end of the day they knew what they were making, and it was going to be a little bit lower of a budget, but like they were going to set out to make an actual horror film. And I think with this one, it was almost like they were trying, like a thing that I felt like happened in the 90s was you would come out with like it was almost like they were planning to have sequels. And because in the 90s, like you would have like, say, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the live action film that came out, it was more of a quote unquote darker, they used their weapons and stuff like that. But then when the sequel came out, the studio got involved. It was, when TMNT 2 came out in the 90s, it was a lot more cartoony and goofy. And that's what it felt like with me, where it was like, we're going to kind of push the boundaries a little bit, but we can still clean it up if we need to make it a more of a PG-13, a 90s PG-13 rated film. So it's almost like they didn't want to commit to either side. They didn't want to commit to being funny. They didn't want to commit to being a horror film. They just try to walk this weird line with a few missed opportunities throughout the thing.
And to be fair, like, apparently they did that successfully, given the number of sequels this has, right? Like, they did create a franchise that went on for a long time. So I guess maybe there's something to be said for that from a box office perspective.
It's like 4 by 97 or something like that. So it was like you were just pushing them out. That's why I was also kind of thinking it. It's like, look at all the sequels. And when they came out, they were trying. It was almost like cash grab, but.
Yeah. Well, and one of them is like Leprechaun in the Hood. And like
dude.
Leprechaun Back to the Hood or something like.
Yeah, I think it was the second one too, wasn't it? I think it was one that. No, that was like the fourth one that came out in 2000. Yeah. And then the one that came out after that was Back to the Hood.
Yes, Back to the Hood is what it was.
My God. Yeah.
But also there was like Leprechaun 4 in space.
Yeah.
Like it just really, there was no end to the adventures, which, if you're going to be in this world where it's like funny and over the top and kind of ridiculous, it makes sense that you would just get like bigger and crazier with the sequels too. Like that's what keeps the people coming back. Like that's what you want from the movie. But I think the biggest difference I saw between this one and a movie like Terrifier is exactly to your point. Terrifier would really sell out and deliver some of those super tense, super scary, and then ultimately like very gory scenes that gave you that reason to stay kind of like on the edge of your seat and to actually be like a little afraid and have that like horror dread that good horror movies give you. Whereas I don't feel like I ever got to that point with this one. Like he was almost like cartoony, I think is the way you put it, in the way that he did the murders and stuff. And the characters were like, the story didn't make a whole lot of sense and the acting wasn't great. So it wasn't like I felt super compelled by anyone in the movie, with the one exception that when Nathan fell and got his leg caught in the bear trap, that was gnarly.
That was pretty bad.
Did not care for that one bit.
Also, I feel like I have a new phobia of getting my ear cut off.
I would not like that either.
Yeah, that would just be annoying. I feel like you would hear everything, like how Tubi was sounding with this film.
Right.
You know what I mean? It would be terrible.
Could you imagine?
Yeah. This is also like a movie First off, yet again, don't know why I didn't watch it in the 90s. But I feel like our listeners, like I have a feeling that a few of them are going to have some pretty strong feelings that this is a very terrifying film or whatever. But much like, Killer Clowns from Outer Space was to me when I was a kid because I watched it. But now that we're watching as adults, it's just a different feeling, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So don't hate us too much based off the opinion. If we watched it when we were younger too, we would be just like you probably.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing for us is neither of us have like the nostalgia factor with this one, which I think would be a big part of enjoying it. Like I could see this being a movie that you saw when you were just a little bit too young to see it that didn't completely turn you off from horror, but like
scary.
Yeah.
Piss out of you, but enough. Just enough to do it. Yep.
Yeah. So we do need to get into how 1993 stacks up to the other 90s years, but I have a little quiz I want to give you before we get into that. Did you have anything else you wanted to go over before we started down that route?
I didn't realize that we were quizzing each other today.
Well, this is really more of a thought exercise.
Quiz.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pop quiz, sure. Pop
quiz, that's what I'll take.
Okay. I'm going to describe two characters to you, and then I want you to tell me which one of them is a monster.
My heart's happy right now. Okay, go.
Character A mythological creature who everyone knows exists only for one reason, which is to protect their bag of gold, and is just trying to get back his bag of gold that was stolen and smuggled out of the country by a drunk Irishman.
Yep.
That's character A. Character B.
Yep.
A total jerk who incessantly makes fun of a mentally handicapped person, then convinces him that everyone thinks he's dumb and makes fun of him behind his back. Then lies to him about there being a surgery that can make him smarter, and then makes him fight a troll because keeping the gold is the only way to get that surgery that he can't actually have and didn't think he needed before character B started telling him so. Which character do you think is the real monster in this movie?
To add on to character B being the douchebag and the one who is the monster, then also at the end, when being told there's no surgery like that, said, I know, but he thinks that's the case. When the kid was the one who brought it up in the first place.
Exactly. The guy never even knew there was a surgery that he would want to have until that kid sold him on it. And then he's trying to guilt trip other people like, oh yeah, I'm just doing all this for him because he thinks no, you little liar, manipulative.
I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you because that kind of sneaky shit's what happens in the office, Daniel.
Yes,
and I hate it.
You don't have to tell me twice about that.
They're like, I didn't say that. Oh, you tell me that they're the monster. That kid's the monster. And you know what? I wish it was both of his ears that were bit off.
I wish they would have just put him in the bear trap and left him.
He'd be hearing in 2D for the rest of his life.
Yeah, this movie still would have sounded like shit.
2D. No, it's funny that you brought that up, though, because at the end, when watches each time, I was like, you motherfucker. Like, what? How? First off, how can you talk to Francis like that?
Yeah.
Second off, Ozzy's supposed to be your friend, man.
Yeah.
And also accept them for what they're worth.
Yeah. No, I'm with you.
If sending friends that have a low intelligence off to some surgery, make-believe surgery is a thing, you would have done that to me a long time ago, Daniel. We both know who has the smarts here. It is not this guy.
Here's the thing. I'm not a monster.
That's true.
And I respect you.
You're not. I appreciate it.
I think you're a good friend.
I appreciate that. You could also say you're not stupid, too, though. That's a thing.
Oh, no, I was saying, I respect you. I meant to say I respect you and your intelligence. I think that you are a smart person.
And I'm just stupid enough to accept that. So thank you very much.
Just barely got away with that one.
He's dumb, but man, he has a temper.
Yeah.
Okay. So how's this stack up?
Yeah. So just to kind of review where we're at so far from each year, in 1990, we had It, Parts 1 and 2, the made-for-TV movie Jacob's Ladder and Arachnophobia. 1991, we had People Under the Stairs, Silence of the Lambs, Dead Space, and Ernest Scared Stupid. 1992, we had Man Bites Dog, Lawnmower Man, Candyman, and Ghostwatch. And now for 1993, we have Doppelganger and Leprechaun. And the only other movie that we've covered from 93 already was Kronos, which was a long time ago. But I think, coming out of previous weeks, we had 1991 in the lead. We had 1990 as a close second. And then 92 was bringing up the end.
Yeah.
I think that we both kind of liked Doppelganger more than we thought we would.
Yeah.
I think Leprechaun, you were a little more like slightly positive. I was a little more slightly negative. And then Kronos, I think we both generally kind of liked, but it wasn't like, one of our all-timers or anything. Yeah, so I think what's really interesting to me is like, where do you think 93 stacks up next to 92?
Yeah, so I think...
Because I think 92 had higher highs, but also lower lows.
It had Candyman too, though. Wait, which year do you think? 92 or 93? What did you say?
92, because I think Ghostwatch and Candyman were both great, but I think Man Bites Dog and Lawnmower Man were both kind of terrible.
Gnarly, bad.
Like worse than in any of these.
Yeah, so what I would do if my list goes 91, 90, 93, 92.
Okay, so you're bumping this one above 92.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it has Nightmare Before Christmas. Kronos.
Oh, we're going to count that one.
Well, I mean, it's on my list, not theirs. But it doesn't have too many. If I'm basing it strictly on the two that we watched, I would way rather watch the two, Leprechaun and Doppelganger. Like I'm gonna rewatch those. Whereas with the other two of 92, I wanted to punch Lawnmower Man in the face so many times, and then don't even get me started with Man Bites Dog.
Yeah, no, I get you on that, and I think I'm very much on the same page. I was kind of coming at it more from like. But Candyman and Ghostwatch, there just isn't anything in 93 that touched either of those movies for me.
Yeah. Yeah, if it was just Candyman and Ghostwatch, I think that Man Bites Dog brings both of those down.
So I'm going to allow it. I'm going to get on board, and I'll give you the vote to ratify that for this week. But I think I want to reserve the right to revisit this in future weeks.
Yeah, I think it'll get bumped. But it did have Buffy the Vampire. I'm going to stick to my guns, but I do want to revisit myself too.
Deal.
Yep.
So yeah.
Oh, and Army of Darkness. This one's difficult, man.
We can't talk about sequels though.
Oh yeah, we can't. Oh, okay. Yeah, 93, 92 then.
Okay. Deal. So then our power rankings updated are 1991 is the best, 1990 is the second best, 93 third, and then 92 still bringing up the rear. And next week, we're going to be back with a brand new episode of our first movie of 1994, which I will say was really difficult to find movies that match the criteria and were also available to stream. But we did it. So next week, we'll be back 1994 with In the Mouth of Madness.
Perfect. Watch it on Tubi with uBlock Origins.
If you can deal with the sound. And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com or hit us up on the IG. That's what the kids call Instagram. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I got a fun fact for you to start this episode out.
Oh, yeah? Hit me.
So have you heard about all the drama surrounding YouTube and ad blockers?
I have.
Do you know what I discovered when rewatching this episode or watching this movie? That also works for Tubi. If you have uBlock Origin
Really?
extension on Chrome, it blocks the advertisements.
On Tubi?
Yeah, I swear to God.
Interesting.
I rewatched
Okay.
both of these movies using that just because it was commercial free at that point. But yeah.
Well, I have a fun fact for you.
Uh-oh.
I had never really thought about how you might spell the word leprechaun. And now I've thought about it way too much, so it never looks right. So
Is that right? Because
I feel like what we basically are arriving at in this season is the theme could be movies that are hard to spell. Because we have arachnophobia, doppelganger, leprechaun. I hate it all.
I'm actually lucky just to be able to say half of those. That's how bad it is with me. Yeah, this one definitely, yeah. But how often? Why would we write leprechaun? You know, like,
it's not a thing that comes up a lot.
Nah. It also looks like a word that if you had never seen, you never heard it be said and seen the word at the same time, that if you only read the word, you would pronounce it totally different.
Yeah. Leprechaun.
Mm-hmm. I would definitely say Sean. Leprechaun.
Well, that's how you'd say it if you were Irish.
Oh, good call.
Yeah. Lepresean.